So, good morning. Thank you all for joining today's session titled Equity in Action, Building Brighter Careers with TRIO Programs and Supportive Career Centers. My name is Dr. Terry Mon III. I am the Vice President of Research and Director of the Pell Institute for the Study of Opportunity in Higher Education at COE. The Pell Institute remains a central space for conducting and disseminating research and policy analysis to improve educational opportunities and outcomes for low-income, first-generation students, veterans, and college students with disabilities. With this purpose, over the last year and a half, the Pell Institute and its partners, Career Launch and Loyola University Chicago, have been exploring the relationship between TRIO programs and career centers in hopes of developing new policies and practices to support the career readiness of students from low-income backgrounds. This project has consisted of collecting a range of data, such as online content, surveys, interviews, and focus groups. Through this work, we have begun to arrive at interesting findings that we would love to share with you all today. It is with this focus I'm happy to introduce our panel for today's session. So first, to my immediate left is Marielle Rubio, who will be leading this morning's conversation. Marielle is a partner and director of Impact at Career Launch, a social enterprise dedicated to providing career readiness opportunities to students and staff nationwide. In her role, she oversees the development and outcomes of Career Launch's curricular and programming among its partnering institutions. Next to her, we have Marianne Rainey, who is a senior program officer at Ascendium Education Group. Ascendium's mission is to elevate opportunities and outcomes for learners from low-income backgrounds so they can secure good jobs and achieve upward mobility. Marianne is responsible for strategic grant making in support of Ascendium's streamlined key learner transitions focus area, which seeks to improve learner transitions to and through post-secondary education and successfully into the workforce. Next to her is Nisha Taylor, who serves as the Director of Career Readiness at the National Association of Colleges and Employers, the nonprofit association dedicated to serving college career professionals, university relations, and recruiting professionals. As Director of Career Readiness at NACE, she manages the organization's career readiness initiatives and engagement with college and universities nationwide. And finally, we have Sean O'Keefe, who is the founder and a partner at Career Launch. Sean oversees the day-to-day operations of Career Launch and leads the organization's strategic efforts to develop partnerships with schools, many of which include TRIO programs. We're excited to have each one of our panelists here today. A round of applause for them. Before we begin with our panel, we want to acknowledge the Ascendium Education Group for sponsoring this research. We are grateful to Ascendium for making this session possible and for their dedication to student success. And now I'll turn the program over to Marielle.
Thank you, Terry. Good morning, TRIO.
Good morning.
So let me start by asking each panelist a foundational question to get this conversation started. What are the current challenges and opportunities within the field of career readiness and workforce development, and why should they matter to the TRIO community? And Marianne, we'll start with you.
Yeah, thanks, Marielle. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
It's good to be here with you this morning. Marielle, I'll start with the latter part of your question, which is, why do I think that career readiness and workforce development should really matter to the TRIO community? First, I think that TRIO programs are really uniquely poised to understand the systemic barriers that TRIO students are facing, especially as they go to and through college. And this work is really about ensuring that students are not just academically prepared, but really college ready. And I think this aligns with TRIO's mission of educational equity and access, and starts to extend that mission into post-completion success, because ultimately we want to ensure that students are accessing thriving wages and sustainable jobs. We know that students from low-income backgrounds are 4 times more likely not to complete a bachelor's degree, and even when they do complete that bachelor's degree, they're 40% more likely not to be, or to be unemployed or earning wages less than their higher income peers. So I think as the nation's largest infrastructure, the federal government's largest infrastructure for supporting low-income learners across the nation, there's really an opportunity there to ensure that students are not just college ready, but career ready as well. They're reaping the benefits of that credential. So let's talk about some challenges and opportunities, and maybe I'll start with challenges and then see if others have challenges that they would mention. I think first, if anyone has been attending conferences this summer, you're hearing about the changing technology, AI, and automation. I think that's impacting every industry as we know it. And with that, I think we're going to see some widening skills gaps, especially that's going to affect the students that we're here to serve. So there is a challenge there in ensuring that the students that we serve are accessing credentials and skills that are going to make them prepared for the jobs of tomorrow, to make sure that they have the technical skills to be adaptable in such a changing job market. I think second challenge I would say is educational equity and access. So learners from low-income backgrounds are more likely not to have access to really high-quality internships, career guidance, professional development. And so that's going to be a challenge for learners, especially as they're navigating a complex job market. And that's what I would say is my third challenge, is the changing job market. We're seeing an increase in remote jobs. We're seeing an increase in non-traditional pathways to career development, which is really challenging our notions of what traditional career development is. And so we really have to be intentional about making sure that our students are adaptable and have those skills to adapt to such a competitive job market. I'll pause there and see if others have challenges that they would mention.
It's an incredibly difficult question. And how do you wrap it up in a few minutes? Hi, everyone. My name is Nisha Taylor, and again, I work for the National Association for Colleges and Employers. So excited to be a part of this conversation. Some of the things that I was thinking about really are issues that I think TRIO programs probably are very aware of, as you were mentioning, right? Systemic barriers overall in higher education, right? How those things are kind of baked into our systems and how to start to break those things down, including things like just the awareness of certain colleges or degrees over some others. Like I've watched again and again happen that certain resumes with the right school doesn't get, plucked out of a pile and things like that. So just broad systemic inequities are really just a part of the higher education experience, and how to continually look for those barriers and try to combat them and remove them. There's also a huge lack of funding, in my perspective, on career preparation overall, and especially internships and helping students get initial work experience. I'm thinking about systemic barrier in a lot of the conversations I've had with Career Launch about access to network. And if you just tell students to network, they will network in their current networks. And if you understand sociology a little bit, right, networks recreate current systems. So we really actually need to look at ways to change or really adjust and sometimes combat current networks in helping our students proceed. The other thing I'll say is that there are really muddy pathways forward, right? And so we have issues with connecting workforce development experiences or early work experiences into some of the early experiences in higher education, maybe community colleges, and helping students proceed. Think about the transfer issues that exist in our nation that are huge barriers to progress and certainly career. So thinking about, can we really look for better, smoother pathways? And then the broad attack on DEI in our nation, I think, is a threat to really combating all those systemic inequities that I was mentioning, right, as these major challenges. Some of the opportunities I see right now, especially in terms of this conversation, there's an increasing focus on career outcomes and career in the curriculum and career in colleges as a core need. So, and this has been happening, I would say, building over the last 10 years or so. So I think there's some momentum coming forward that we might be able to capture. And then the other thing is I really see there's an expansion of these kind of career everywhere, really taking that up and making sure that career doesn't just live in one place and lives throughout a college experience. So there's a lot of great work happening in that area. And then there's some really innovative models that I think we can all kind of drive towards that include things like apprenticeships, co-ops, right, deep industry engagements, and guided pathways that really support educational costs throughout a student's experience as they enter the world of work. So those are some of the things that I see as opportunities or kind of good stuff to watch out for. I'll pass it along.
Thanks, Nisha. Nice to be with you this morning. When I think about this question about challenges and opportunities regarding career readiness and workforce development, the first thing that comes to mind for me is that most of our institutions have an opt-in model regarding career services. And the big play is to get to a point where it's required experiences of our students. That's going to take a while. That's going to take a lot of structural change, systemic change. There's great momentum going in that direction, but most of our institutions right now have an opt-in model, and we know that about a third of all students ever enter their career services center or department, and that number is even lower for low-income students. Even if we solve the required versus opt-in model, there's still a challenge. The challenge being that for the past 50 plus years, most of our energy when it comes to career services has been focused on things like resume and interview preparation and putting on workshops and career fairs. Now, all those things are great and they're fundamental and they need to be done. But what is the highest good that we can provide our students? Do we want to be teaching our students just to get a job or get a job that they want and that they desire? And that distinction is very important, and it seems like it's very difficult to achieve. But as we've peeled back the layers, I've been fortunate over the last 15 years to be a faculty member and work in my university's first-gen program. And this idea of teaching students how to get a job they want and create optionality has just been remarkable. And so, one of the things I would like to impart upon our time here today is thinking about the fact that most students don't know that 80% of all jobs and internships are in what's called the hidden job market. These positions are never posted online, or they're already filled by the time they're posted. And so what can we do to help students, one, become aware, and then two, access those positions in the hidden job and hidden internship market? Strata earlier this year released some research about 52% of all students are underemployed after graduation. Underemployed defined as having a job that didn't require their college degree. And part of the reason for the underemployment is that when over 90% of students spend most of their time looking for a job by applying online, not knowing that 80% of jobs are in the hidden job market. And when most or all of the effort is spent applying online, students become frustrated, and sometimes they give up and they just take the first job they can get. That's not optionality. So this question was about challenges and opportunities. The opportunity within TRIO is amazing because the alumni base, millions of TRIO alumni that students can potentially tap into to access the hidden job market. So the short answer to accessing the 80% of jobs and internships in the hidden job market is social capital. More specifically, career-aligned social capital. And what's really exciting is some of the energy and momentum that TRIO programs have to teach their students how to tap into the alumni base to access those opportunities.
Thanks for sharing, Sean, Nisha, and Marianne. And we know that there's a lot of layers to unpack to this question. And just to highlight a little bit of what was mentioned, right? How do we help our TRIO students become aware of career opportunities and also gain access to those work-based learning opportunities that can look like internships and post-college employment as well. And so, yes, there is a lot of momentum in career outcomes, and how can we immerse and really focus on those within the TRIO community. And so my next question is for Marianne. As a program officer at Ascendium, you hear about all kinds of conversations in the world of career readiness and workforce development. And so with this perspective, what role should TRIO have in preparing students for career success? And what can we say about TRIO and career readiness from a national perspective?
Yeah, thank you for that. First, I would say TRIO programs are already playing a role in supporting students to and through college. I think in talking with Dr. Terry Vaughn about this project, there is a benefit that TRIO programs can customize their programs to really take into account their student and geographical context. And so they can be really responsive to the needs of their students. I think on the other hand, then what we don't have yet, and I know this project is I'm looking at Dr. Terry Vaughn because this is all on his shoulders to solve this, but this project is really going to elevate, I think, a codified model and a shared understanding of what it looks like to leverage TRIO capacity to fill in some of those gaps when we think about career readiness and workforce development. I think that TRIO programs are so poised to support this because they understand, again, the specific barriers and problems that their learners are facing. But like you said, what's happening at the national level? I think a couple of things have come to mind. So one of the things I recently learned of was a TRIO program in Tennessee that was partnering with their local Goodwill to support this specific issue. And so I think these things are happening on the ground, and really this work is to try and elevate some of those models so that, again, we have a shared understanding of what are some of the strategic, intentional things that TRIO programs are doing. Even if it's not to leverage their own capacity, what are those strategic partnerships they're having, such as with Goodwill to support some of their learners? The other thing that I think is happening nationally is we're seeing a lot of federal investments in specific industries and sectors for workforce development. And I think there's an opportunity there because the students that we serve are the same students who are underrepresented in some of these industries, such as healthcare, technology, and engineering. And so there's an opportunity, I think, there to think about how are we ensuring that students are aware of these opportunities and they understand how their credential then leads to certain careers or industries. And so there's an opportunity just to make sure that we're being intentional about those guided pathways that Nisha mentioned, and really leveraging not only to diversify these workforces, but ensure that our students are then set up for success in the workforce.
Definitely. Yeah, thanks for sharing, Marianne. And you hit on a key point of leveraging capacity, which is a lot of what this study is highlighting, and whether strategic partners can be external to the institution or with the Career Center particularly. So I invite Sean or Nisha, anything you'd like to add?
Well, one thing that you mentioned was just that it's already happening, and I think that's one thing to pay attention to. It sounds like that's exactly how this research is being done, is by digging into what's already happening all around. So these partnerships probably already exist in a variety of ways. And I like the piece that you said about a particular industry connection. I think it actually goes back to what Sean was saying, is like, a little bit of understanding the framework of how this kind of career development can occur locally, right? That local to like your TRIO alumni, right? Who can you bring back to connect to create new networks for students? And also, who are your local employers who want to be engaging locally and start to develop those deeper partnerships to really show like how do you get into this place of work? And how can we help guide you and connect you to the right degree pathway to walk right in there? That a little bit happens through relationships, or maybe it all happens through relationships, right? But I like that point that you're bringing, that it's already occurring in some ways. Let's lift up those best practices and then think local a little bit in terms of your local community.
Yeah, to build on that, since we started this research project, we've been thinking about how do we bring awareness through strategic partnerships, and then 2 TRIO programs, awareness to students early and often about things like the 15 years of research that NACE has done on the top 8 skills and competencies that employers want, and to bring awareness of that. Things like social capital and life design, these concepts that if we can bring these to our students, bring awareness early, they're more likely to have work-based learning opportunities and internships, which are great indicators of strong first jobs and changing that statistic about the large number of underemployment.
Thanks for sharing. And I heard the word relationships mentioned, whether that's internally, right, or with employers and how we support students. And so with that being said, I'd now like us to turn to some of the findings emerging from our study, exploring the relationship between TRIO programs and career centers. And one of the biggest challenges we found from the study is that establishing relationships between TRIO programs and career centers is difficult, and you might resonate with this. But these relationships are not only possible, but also very impactful when it comes to supporting students' career outcomes. And so I'd like to ask all the panelists the following questions. What would you say are some of the challenges and opportunities in building these relationships between TRIO programs and career centers? And Nisha, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I think one of the things to recognize is these are both taxed offices, right? And so you've got folks that have a lot on their plates. As was mentioned, career services often is an opt-in, right? It tends to be a smaller office on a campus. It tends to feel a little sidelined. The same thing might be true of these TRIO centers that are not placed in a center point in the conversation in a campus. And so if there's ways that the work that's being done in both of those offices can be elevated, that's really a question of leadership in many ways, of framing the critical work that's being done in these centers from the top. I think there's ways that those offices might have a little bit better time connecting. One of the things that I feel like, focusing on the challenge there is that there might not be common language, right? There's that siloing that happens on campuses, really just because your head is down and you're working so hard. To think of the ways that you can start to bring together common terminology, common language, and get folks really doing what Sean was saying, which is to be aware of career from the very beginning of a student's experience, and kind of start to pull that through. I'll talk a little bit more about that later, but I feel like that's a critical piece of the conversation there.
Thanks, Nisha. Sean?
Yep. When I think about challenges and opportunities, relationships between TRIO leaders and career center leaders, 3 things come to mind. Number one is, right now it's not explicitly written into job descriptions or guidelines or frameworks that provide that common language that Nisha mentioned. And a lot of, it's human nature when we think about wanting to do well at our jobs, we think about what is on our job description and how we're measured. And if it's not written in our job description and it's not talked about on how we're measured, then a lot of times people want to spend their energy on what is in those 2 lanes. And so the opportunity is to come up with some guidelines and some language and a framework so that there is something that can galvanize relationships between TRIO and career centers. The second challenge I would say is sometimes there's just not capacity, right? Sometimes we have a 4-year or a 2-year college and serving 10, 20,000 students, and they got 1 or 2 people in the career center to serve all the students. And there might be an interest and a willingness to want to help, but they're just so overloaded they can't take on anything more. I would say the opportunity in there is to piggyback on existing services and leverage what is already being done in the career centers, workshops, career fairs, appointments, maybe make group appointments so that TRIO can piggyback onto and career services and TRIO likewise can piggyback onto one another's programming and resources. The third challenge is something I didn't expect 15 years ago when I got into higher education and 5 years ago when we were given funding to start Career Launch, is that leaders of first gen and TRIO programs have shared with us they are not confident in the services being provided by the career centers. And that was shocking for me to learn. And so that there isn't trust between the programs and the career center. And so I think there's a couple opportunities there. One is that there could be more professional development and training for career counselors and career centers to do a better job of not taking sometimes a cookie cutter approach and meeting students where they're at, and understanding, better understanding diverse needs of diverse student sets. The other thing I would say on the program leader side is to inspect what you expect. And I've had someone share with me that they kind of trusted one student's opinion too much, one student, and that changed their mind about the entire career center. And then they decided to engage in a relationship with the career center, actually went and shadowed an appointment with a student, and their perspective changed. So this idea of better relationships between TRIO leaders and career center leaders and their staffs, so that there's a better understanding of the services to better impact the students.
I think I'll just expand a little bit, because Nisha and Sean, I think you shared many of the things I was going to share as well. When I think of challenges, I also think that perception gaps is a challenge. So as Sean mentioned, career services, they're intended to serve the entire student population, and they may not be keyed in on what are the specific challenges that learners from low income and first generation backgrounds are facing. And so inadvertently may not create targeted or responsive programming that really supports those learners within their specific career pathway or their experience going through career development. So resource constraints, agreed, and the siloing that can happen at institutions as well. I think the other piece to just know is that career services and TRIO programs have different missions and priorities. And so as Sean was saying, career centers have to serve the entire student population, while TRIO programs have a very specific population, and their priorities are slightly different as well. So really what this project is about is how do we create that shared language and understanding so that you can develop a shared goal in doing some of this work. Some of the opportunities too that I think exist, the first one is there is a lot of data to be leveraged as well. So both programs are collecting information about the students that they serve, and by combining together and understanding what data are we both collecting, what do we understand of the students who are accessing certain programs, we can start to understand who isn't being served, who isn't participating in some of these programs, who's being underrepresented, whether it's in an academic area or in a pathway, for example, and then start to build out some joint programming together that really can address some of those gaps and where those students aren't being served. So there is an opportunity for joint workshops and joint programming. I don't think it's about adding, we don't have to think about we're only adding capacity, but really leveraging each other's expertise. So I think that's an opportunity as well.
Yes, thanks for sharing. Yep, I think there being a mutual understanding between TRIO programs and career centers, and the capacity between both, and sharing expertise and workshops, one-on-one sessions, et cetera, is key, because trust in those relationships is really what is guiding a lot of these partnerships and collaborations. And so, Nisha, my next question is for you. From NACE's perspective, what are some practices that career centers can engage in that haven't already been mentioned that can build stronger relationships with TRIO programs?
Yeah, the first thing I thought of that could really kind of shift the way that things are currently functioning and really increase the connection between these offices is really it's something that I've recommended to career services offices that are on these big campuses that just are not able to serve every single student. You have to really rethink then, how can you access the campus? If that is your mission, right, to get that career readiness across the campus, and it really it comes to shifting to a train the trainer model. Instead of thinking you're sitting there and waiting for students to come in the door, you have to get out to each department, each program, faculty members, other divisions on campus, and begin to train, not a complete, like you have to take on my job too, but what are some things that I can help you pull into kind of your everyday practices and your currently existing workshops and your own goals that align with career readiness. Some of the way that, that this is done best is by using that framework of these core career skills that NACE has done the research on, right, that really, and I've seen this again and again in recruiters, they want students to have these core skills, right? Critical thinking, communication, teamwork, those kinds of things are not, usually new ideas to us, and they're happening throughout higher education, but we have to help students really focus on those things and think about them in the workplace. Adjusting so that a campus is doing that work together really shifts the dynamic. I do think that the critical piece to this is a leadership buy-in, because it's a little bit difficult to break these silos if you don't have the leadership really kind of in a strong way supporting this work, supporting an adjustment in career services, supporting faculty professional development. So anybody's office is not the only place a student is getting this, and it's happening in required courses and all that good stuff. But then if there's that common language, you all can hear from career services kind of how they would approach this and kind of use some of the language, right? So I'll give an example. If you think of something like critical thinking, students practice it in almost every class, right? But they might not know how to respond in an interview or when you're shaking a new person's hand. If they said like, hey, do you think you really learned how to do a deep dive inquiry, or are you a critical thinker, somebody that I'd like to bring on board? And to have students just practice, like a good example of this is in my biology class when I had to do this project. I had to come up with my own question, and this is the evidence I collected, this is what I found. But to do that, like practice along the way so that you're getting ready for that moment when you're gonna be in front of somebody and have that sort of career connect moment. So I think that really the framing of these competencies for career readiness into all layers of a campus is ideal, even if you just have the relationship between a strong career services office that gets this idea that career can be everywhere, and that they do that bit of cross-training across to the TRIO office. I think you'll find that you're already doing a lot of this work, and you just have to help students reframe it a bit, adjust, tell their story, get the practice of bragging a little bit, which is very weird to do at first, right? To say that I'm really great at teamwork, and this is why, So just adjusting in that way. A lot of this work is being done, so we have great examples of campuses that have slowly pulled in an overarching focus on career readiness. The language starts to be very common to students from the day they walk in, a lot of times in a first-year seminar or orientation session, they're hearing this idea like, I'm gonna be career ready, here are some core skills that I need to know and be able to talk about by the end of my time here. And then it's practiced and supported throughout the time that they're in their academic journey. So I think those are the critical pieces to really pulling two offices together. Is not more weight on anyone, but a cross-training and a campus-wide commitment.
Thank you, Nisha. Yes, and we know that many career centers are adopting the NACE competencies and the framework, and so that leads to our next question about one of the primary goals of the Pell Institute study, exploring the relationship between TRIO and career centers, is developing a national framework that can be used within TRIO programs nationwide to build stronger relationships with career centers. And so this question is for all panelists. What is the value of developing such a framework? And we'll start with Marianne this time.
Great. So I think first that comes to mind is when Dr. Terry Vaughn and I were talking about this project, one of the things that he wanted to ensure about this framework is that it could be responsive. And so I think one of the things that we've been thinking about is how do we embed a spectrum of intensity of the recommendations, and so that TRIO programs can really take up supports and programming that really are responsive, again, to their context, their resources as well, and then what do they need to build upon from there. There are a couple of other things that I'm really looking forward to of the framework. I mean, of course, it's going to, again, create a shared language that TRIO programs and Career Center staff can use together to create that common goal. But also, it's a way to test out different models. And so I'm really looking forward to, if we go into a pilot or implementation phase, we can then study, okay, we're implementing this part of the framework. What are some metrics that we're going to track along the way to understand the effectiveness of certain interventions or supports, and what do we want to see long term? And so that's like the great part of the framework, is that we can think about how are we piloting and then replicating on scale, so that we're really understanding, again, what are the high impact practices, what's having effectiveness for students, and then think about the long term outcomes and impact of that as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that's exciting about a framework focusing on career support specific to TRIO is that it's going to be a model for how to work in a very different and very focused way to kind of shift systemic inequity, like in the labor market, right? So I think there's some real potential there for, and I've said this all, I've worked at community colleges for many, many years before coming to NACE. Like, if you want to understand how to make systems change in the country, like, go to the places where systems change is already emerging, because literally the commitment of the people in the room here, it already sits in this core space. If we want to make change for access to good jobs and how to truly support someone who's new to the kinds of steps that are about to happen to get ready for a particular type of job that's going to change wealth in their community and family, like some of the information is going to emerge here from this framework. So it's very exciting. I think when you consider really having a common language and perhaps some really concrete common steps for building capital for social mobility and equity, right? That is a game change, I think. So looking for the clues to that by implementing frameworks and trying to understand what really works. I think it is truly change-making, nationally.
Yeah, we're very excited to be working on this framework to share with you all. During this research process, we've been out visiting some of your campuses and talking with you and talking with career leaders to really understand above and beyond kind of the surveys and what we're gleaning in other research instruments of what is going to work, what is going to provide the best opportunity, and what we're gathering is this framework. It's going to be a document and a resource that can bring together both career staffs and TRIO staffs and be able to galvanize that relationship to understand where are our resources, what can we leverage for everything from technologies to events to piggybacking on programming. Earlier we talked about I think I just lost my thought. I guess maybe I'll come back to me on that one.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks, Sean. Yes, this framework that we are putting together is truly from everything we're learning from our survey results, our site visits, and what we're hearing from TRIO. And so, as was mentioned by the panelists, it will be a set of recommendations, best practices that TRIO programs and career centers can utilize to really strengthen these relationships with the end result of helping students, right, post-college to land those employment opportunities and to help with that career mobility as well. And so my last question is for Sean, coming from an organization that works with TRIO programs from a career readiness perspective, what is the best way to roll this framework out to resonate with the TRIO community?
Thanks. I think I was going to roll my last two answers together, so I'll do my best to make up for that. So what we've learned at Career Launch in working with TRIO programs over the last 5 years is optionality is very important. So I think first and foremost, the framework needs to have optionality built into that. What does that mean? There are going to be some campuses and institutions where the TRIO program leaders and staff, they evaluate and assess and say, you know what, we really don't want, I think it's in our best interest to outsource and really have the Career Center lead all of the career readiness efforts. There'll be other TRIO leaders that say, you know what, I want more of like a 50-50 approach in terms of career readiness. And then there's going to be others who say, for different reasons, I think we want to own a majority of the career readiness responsibility inside of TRIO for our TRIO students. The frameworks, the frameworks that we're bringing I think is important to have optionality within the interventions because there can be different models, and then we always got to get all the way down to the student-facing interventions, right? And that, I think, going back to my very first point about career readiness, what is the highest good we can be providing our students? I'm not so sure it's resume support, and I'm not so sure it's interviewing skills. Those things are fundamental. But when we talk about the highest good, it's helping our students understand, number one, early and often, what are the best practices for career readiness and building career-aligned social capital, understanding that 80% of jobs are never posted online, and then teaching students how to go identify the jobs that they want and desire and go get them. So I think it's really important, kind of optionality is twofold. There's optionality in the model of the framework, and then there's optionality within the interventions inside the framework.
Thank you, Sean. And Marianne, Nisha, anything you'd like to add?
There's so much that can happen in this conversation. So it's interesting, Sean, I was thinking about the different mentions of optionality. So we want optionality in this framework, right? So just accessibility to it, because obviously it's going to be implemented differently in different campuses, and you'll have different ability to kind of grab or really move some parts of the framework that's suggested. We want students to have optionality around their career choices, right? So you said early on, the way that you help students move forward is to not sort of fall into that default job that might not be really helping them move towards their goals, to really keep their options open. But we want career support, career readiness to be required. That we do not want to be optional, right? So, but it does not mean that it all has to be on you or the Career Services Office. It should actually be taken broadly. And I think, recently I keep thinking this, like 10 years ago, I remember DEI was sort of this like a new set of terminology, and we were trying to like understand what it meant. I worked here in the City University of New York at a community college, and it was like an office, right? The DEI office, and then the DEI person would say like, pay attention to this thing. And then you realize like, no. Like it's everywhere. It should be everywhere. The same is true of career learning because it is DEI. So thinking about that required center as something that spreads across, I think it's good just to understand that as this framework comes to you and you start to see what those options are, to also advocate for the broad adoption of career readiness as an equity issue.
Sometimes I feel like I'm a bobblehead when I'm just nodding and nodding along. I mean, I could not agree anymore with your comments. The two things that come to mind for me, one, Sean, you use the phrase early and often, and that is one thing that I would really push, is that right now, I think the norm is that we think about careers at the latter part of a student's journey, where it needs to be at the beginning. So that's one key takeaway, is that we have to help students think about what is my trajectory? What do I want to do? And how do we build in that career readiness at the beginning of their educational experience? And then Nisha, just want to double down on what you said about this is not just career centers, and this is just not just TRIO programs' responsibility. It's an institution and system-wide change that we need to make, is this focus not just on access or completion, but post-completion success. And that is an institution-wide imperative to start thinking about. So I think it's really about changing the culture of an institution as well, which begins with these types of supports and interventions, to then think about, like, what are we doing at an institutional level to understand where are our students ending, and what are their outcomes once they completed our college.
One of the things that Terry mentioned to me when we were talking about, getting ready for this panel was just that a lot of the TRIO leaders were like, please don't give me another thing to do, right? And I want to challenge you all to keep that coming a bit, right? Like, I don't think that the answer should be like, you do more and then also do more and then also do more, right? I think we should challenge our institutions, our faculties, to help us carry the load of career readiness. It can't only live in these spaces where, like, you already really get the importance of all these things. It needs to be spread more broadly. And that also, I'm going a little off topic here, but it's important to understand the hierarchies within your institution and how that gets pushed around, right? That, really it is the responsibility of the entire college. It shouldn't just sit in these offices.
Thank you, Nisha, and thank you all for sharing. And what a great discussion, yes, as we're approaching the end of the plenary here. And so as we conclude, I would like to thank our panelists for sharing their insights on the relationship between TRIO programs and career centers. And we will now turn it back to Terry to take some questions from the audience.
Well, I certainly hope you all enjoyed that discussion. I know I did, and I got a lot of work to do too. So we'll now take a few questions from the audience. Before asking questions, please be sure to use the microphones in the aisles and share your name, your TRIO program, and your institution. So I see some mics. I see one. Go for it. Yep.
Thanks, Dr. Terry. Hi, Jeff Garner, past president, NAOP, Portland, Oregon. I have a question for all of our new TRIO directors. What great advice can you give us to them to go about initiating that conversation with the career centers? How much information about our population should they share with the career center? And maybe top 3 tips. Thank you.
Who wants to
I'm happy to start. I think my first recommendation would be to host the meeting in your office as opposed to a neutral site or their office. Invite a couple students to join part of the meeting so that they can meet a couple students and learn from the students about their educational and career goals and kind of get a sense for where they're at now. And then kind of to ask about what their current priorities are and if there's an openness to cultivating a relationship.
Thank you very much. That's perfect.
Any others?
Terry, I would also ask if anyone has innovative things that they're already doing on campus. I would love to hear that too. So I welcome anyone who wants to share, or that would be really interesting.
Perfect. You have a call out. We got a question here.
Hi, my name is Michelle Mears. I'm the assistant director of an SSS program at Sam Houston State University in Huntsville, Texas. Yes, if you've been there, you probably understand why that's kind of an underwhelming response. So I've worked for TRIO for 3 years. Prior to that, I was a career services professional. and I'm a licensed career counselor. And so I've been riveted with everything you're saying, Sean. I've seen the work that you've done, and it's fabulous. I guess my question is, what advice do you have with dealing with upper leadership and administration in universities? That optionality is a process, and it's not a one and done cookie cutter thing. You know, it's all very dependent on the individualized needs of the student. And sometimes in this world of data, you could use data to tell a story, but it's not always a quick process. That's one reason I love my work at TRIO. Everything we do is very personalized and individualized, right? So do you have any advice on how to get that message of optionality to upper leadership in the university? Because sometimes it's stifling, to be honest with you.
Yeah. I mean, one thing I'll say is that NACE has an amazing research arm, and we have done some incredible work to show that, like, you go to the Career Services Office once, and you have an increased potential for salary and job attainment. So showing the power of career services can be helpful in just driving the story there. Some of this is just managing, like thinking about change management generally. So, and I was thinking about the previous question just about relationships, right? And that is more of an art than a science, but it can be looking for the little glimmers of agreement or support within leadership and having a coffee, you know, and sitting down and starting to build connections that then can lead to some change, right? It's like pick the low-hanging fruit first or whatever, and then start to build that alliance. So there's a whole literature on change management that might be helpful even to think about in the framework of how to support and advocate, you know, for the kind of change that we're looking for.
And I would add, show up with data. And we're very proud that we just, a few months ago, Career Launch partnered with NACE because of, NACE just finished 18 months of field study doing research to prove the reliability, validity, and usability of 25 dimensions of the 8 skills that employers value the most. And in this, these rubrics that came out of this study, there are 4 levels of skill development. And if we can find 10 minutes when a student enters our colleges for them to take this career readiness inventory, that looks at career readiness, and then we have a second option that also has questions about career mobility best practices and social capital. This does a couple things. One is it is a way to bring career awareness early into the student's mindset, and it captures baseline data for not only your program, so that you know where your students are as it relates to these 8 skills that employers value the most, along with some other aspects of career mobility best practices. And the student gets a PDF report with their results on kind of where they're at. It's a formative tool, so meaning that the student can then take it again later to see their growth. But even if you just have the baseline and you work it in for the students to take it 10 minutes into their orientation or first year experience sometime early, that data set gets rolled into a data analytics portal that then you could share that data with leadership at one of these meetings to show to them where your students are and maybe where support is needed.
Yeah, to show growth from your interactions and your interventions is a huge mover especially for administration and showing those alignments.
Okay, thank you.
I think we have time for one more innovation or question, but feel free to hang around and you can speak with the panelists after. Sorry about you two. One last.
Good morning.
Hey.
Brian Post, Director of Upper Bound Programs at the State University of New York at Plattsburgh. I felt like it was important to maybe share a little bit of what's already happening with pre-college programs, because I know the attention right now is at post-secondary and career centers on campuses, but I know all of our pre-college programs have vibrant career exploration and readiness curriculums already happening in their programs, and we've had a long-standing internship program for our rising seniors. Every summer, we place 25 to 30 interns out in local placements in our community, and it's a paid internship, and we've broken into a lot of local industries. I also happen to be a longtime member of our local workforce development board. I'm the chair of the youth council / committee, and the reason I'm there is really obviously to keep a pulse on what's happening in our area for jobs and what employers are looking for, but then it's also networking to find placements for our students. And just recently we finally broke into our hospital medical center, where we had 12 interns this past summer in a variety of departments. It's high school students that they are taking them into surgeries, seeing firsthand what's happening. So it's happening on the ground, I know, throughout the country with other upper bounds and other pre-college programs. But the sort of frustrating point is it sort of stagnates once they get to college. We are on a college campus, and I do tap into our career development office, but we're often a little disappointed with sort of the level of what they bring to the table. And they finally made a move on campus to get out of our sort of ivory tower, and now they're in our student center, which is great, but it is optional, like you've talked about, and a lot of our students don't tap into that. And we've sort of taken it upon ourselves to run this, and we find, that we end up, having better results. So I'm hopeful that, maybe this new framework is gonna move things along to make it a more vibrant office where students, get something valuable out of it.
Yeah, a couple of things I want to respond to there. First of all, amazing work. I know it's not easy what you're doing. I mean, it sounds incredible. And this is really where, like, if you can look for places where this is already occurring, it's like the secret sauce lives there, and I'm sure you don't want to not share it. You want to share it, right? Because you're excited about it. So looking for deep industry engagement, if there are already ways for your offices to just build relationships with industry, that's going to be a giant influx of career connection and support that'll start to occur. That might be something you could do in collaboration with your career services office. They could even point you to folks, or there's ways that probably you have more different connections maybe than a career services office, and it can be improved. But I will say also that NACE is, one of the largest organizations that collects all career services as a professional organization, and we have a lot of material online around best practices for career services offices, how to position them, and then literally things that can be done internally for them to kind of really, be impactful. And so that's something to think about too. Like if you are, because you mentioned too that some folks are kind of a little disappointed in the career services that they're bumping into or trying to connect with. That's valid, right? Like it may be that this has been an underfunded and underfocused area at the college. So looking to NACE for some professional development is also an option. We have some really interesting, not only frameworks, but training possibilities to really upskill and help those career offices kind of lift up and do some of that impactful work where you're really getting students into the world of work and really giving them that leg into the first job and internship experiences.
Oh, thank you so much, Nisha. Well, I want to thank all of the panelists for offering their expertise and insight regarding the relationship between TRIO programs and career centers. Let's give them a round of applause.